one lady who's a registered voter in that constituency of Nalasopara and who votes through that polling station. Her name is mentioned about 6 times. And what we found was there were indeed 6 entries against the same person, and this is a matter of grave concern. I wanted to look this up to see whether the claims that were made during the press conference held by the leader of the opposition, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, that particular assembly constituency, Vidhan Sabha constituency, is located in my parental home district of Bangalore urban. But the voter rolls of the Karnataka constituencies, any constituency, we have tried multiple such constituencies in Karnataka, they simply do not download from the CEO's website. There is this case of a voter called Minta Devi, who is shown as a voter whose date of birth is from 1900. Okay, that makes her 124 years old, whereas she says that she is just about 30 or 39 years old. Take the voters out of the equation, then what is it that the candidates are going to contest for? For whose mandate are they going to contest elections, to sit in parliament? So the voters are the primary stakeholders, and when voters start raising these concerns, like the 2 people who appeared before the Supreme Court and said, "Milord, we are now recorded as dead in the voter rolls." That was done without asking us for any documents. But now, when we went back to our election officers in our constituencies and said, "I am alive, please include me in the voters list," they're asking me for scores of documents to prove that I am alive. How did you remove them? By claiming that they were dead without any single documentary support. The voter roll that I have looked at is in relation to 2 specific polling stations. And the cross verification that I have done is primarily desk based. So I have not visited the polling station and interacted with the voters there, but even doing the desk based research was adequate to point out to one major discrepancy. On social media, a certain page from that voter list with photographs of the voters was circulated, saying that one lady who's a registered voter in that constituency of Nalasopara and who votes through that polling station, her name is mentioned about 6 times on the voter list, and that page where her photograph, name, age, gender and the husband's name were all shown and marked. But because these are photographic electoral rolls, they are not available to anybody other than the election bureaucracy and polling agents. What we find on the voter list database of the Election Commission of India are voter rolls without photographs. So I decided to download that particular voter roll by first checking up which specific polling station does it belong to, and I was able to locate that. It took some extra time to download. Normally it happens quite quickly, but there was some problem with the server, I think. So when we downloaded that and we looked for the name of this person whose details are entered in 6 places with 6 different epic numbers. These are the electronic photo identity card numbers, because these are all unique numbers, they can't be repeated. The 6 times they were mentioned, so we cross-checked that. And what we found was there were indeed 6 entries against the same person. There were no photographs, of course, but only 1 out of the 6 was marked as deleted. The other 5 were on 2 pages of the voter list. It's a whole bunch of papers. So page number 26 and page number 42, I think. 26 had about 4 live entries for the same person, and the other page had 1 live entry. The 6th one had been deleted. So this very clearly showed that the voter roll that we downloaded dated 29th October 2024, that is about a month before the Maharashtra Vidhan Sabha elections were conducted. It was as recent as that, and the discrepancy which the social media stories were portraying continued to persist. So that is what we were able to identify, and then we circulated it in the form of an email alert to all the media contacts that we have, drawing their attention to the fact that this discrepancy continues to persist. So all 6 names are not live, but 5 are live, but 6 entries are definitely there. And this is a matter of grave concern We don't know, we cannot make this claim that this person went and voted 6 times. Not at all. But the fact that this person is mentioned 5 times on the same page and they are all live, that is, cause 4 times on the same page and once on another page. One, of course, has been deleted. So that is huge cause for concern. That's the reason why we thought that the cross verification was successful. Why was this cross verification necessary? You will recall that when similar stories were surfacing in the media, the opposition parties were making claims based on images of the photographic voter rolls. The Election Commission was dismissing them by saying that these are not what we have generated through our database. We didn't give them. Those are the kinds of responses that were coming from the Election Commission. So we thought, let us look at the Election Commission's own database as of this week and cross-verify, and that's the result that's in front of all of you, which you have seen.
As you have mentioned that you have found it through social media, can you please explain it, like which platform of social media that you have found?
Yes, first of all, it was, I happened to chance upon it in one of the WhatsApp groups where members are all advocates of electoral reform. Their political leanings might be diverse, but they are all people who would like to see a clean, fair and reliable electoral process in India. And then I saw that it was that image and that particular claim that the name figures 6 times was circulated on a certain Twitter account on X. And once we saw that, and I decided that we should do this cross verification, then I went to, I started work on the computer and I did a Google search and we found it on not only that website but also on Reddit. It was being circulated, so under various handles. So we selected one of them and we verified that yes, that image is there, and even the veracity of that particular page is something that had to be cross-checked, specifically because of the Election Commission's denial and refusal that they had ever distributed those kinds of forms containing the voters' names to anybody. So then what we discovered was this, that the serial numbers that were mentioned on against this, this is a woman voter, the serial numbers that were mentioned against her entry in what the social media was circulating and what we found on the Election Commission's database were different. So the inference that we could draw from that was probably the social media image was of a page from the electoral rolls from the Lok Sabha elections that were conducted in Maharashtra in 2024. But what we found on the Election Commission's database, and we particularly looked for that, was the voter list as revised prior to the Vidhan Sabha elections conducted in the same year. So there is a discrepancy in the serial numbers, but the epic numbers all match. So that was our confirmation that the claims made by people who discovered it and initially circulated on social media are borne out by the documents which the Election Commission itself has publicly disclosed. Unfortunately, we have not been able to do a similar kind of research on the entire voter list even for that polling station because there are so many names there. But that particular list, of course, does not have multiple entries of similar nature except for this one case. And also you will recognize that there are close to 1 billion voters across the country. About 970 million is the figure that we were told during the 2024 Lok Sabha elections. Physically cross-verifying all the voter lists by downloading all of them from the Election Commission's database requires an army of researchers. And that's something that we will not be able to manage given the extreme constraints on our resources, both financial and human resources. So we would love to replicate this exercise, provided there are more examples discovered by others from previous poll processes, and then we can cross-verify them. But there is also another obstacle. I wanted to look this up to see whether the claims that were made during the press conference held by the leader of the opposition, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, that particular assembly constituency, Vidhan Sabha constituency, is located in my parental home district of Bangalore Urban. Although I work in Delhi, but my parental home district is Bangalore Urban, and I wanted to cross-check those claims that were made during the press conference, but the voter rolls of the Karnataka constituencies, any constituency, we have tried multiple such constituencies in Karnataka, they simply do not download from the CEO's website. So we tried on a sample basis for various constituencies, assembly constituency, various polling stations. The message that we always receive after we have successfully entered the names of the polling station that we want and the CAPTCHA code and all of that, just a message pops up saying download success. But then you check on your computer in every folder, the document has not downloaded anywhere at all. So I was not able to verify from my own parental home district as to whether those claims made about Mahadevpura. There was one particular thing that I wanted to check about polling station which is in a village called Bhoganahalli, where similar cases of multiple entries were reported. But in the absence of access to the Election Commission's database, I not only tried through the CEO's website, I tried it through the Election Commission's own voter services portal, but those electoral lists, we've tried it on about 3 different occasions over the last 3 days. The voter lists, the PDF files simply cannot be downloaded. I don't know if it has changed today, I haven't tried it today, but as of yesterday, they could not be downloaded.
As you mentioned that there are discrepancies in the Karnataka Mahadevpura Assembly constituency, right?
Yes.
And there are a list of fake duplicate votes
Yes.
and irregularities,
Yes.
invalid entries and
Yes.
so on. Do you think that these irregularities are the result of accidental errors or there is serious ethical concern?
I can explain my response by citing 2 examples. Now you will all, your viewers also may recall that there is this case of a voter called Minta Devi, who is shown as a voter whose date of birth is from 1900. Okay, that makes her 124 years old, whereas she says that she is just about 30 or 39 years old. And that could probably be attributed to a clerical error, where instead of entering 1990 as the year of birth, maybe 1900, the year 1900 was entered. That is probably a clerical error. But the kinds of other examples from Mahadevpura, particularly from Bhoganahalli, the example that we have talked about in Alasopara, they cannot be clerical errors. They are clear-cut examples of negligence, or it could even be dereliction of duty. Now, it's very simple to, I hope you will show this as images along with this interview. If you look at that particular page that we have circulated by highlighting the entries in yellow, on one page you have 6 entries for this lady. One of them only has been deleted. The remaining, there are 5 entries. One has been deleted. The remaining 4 are all on the same page. So when you sign off on a draft electoral roll after the summary revision and say that this is the final version, are you not even looking at the pages? How come this person's entry, and they will have access to photographs which we don't have, because we are neither polling agents nor we are election officials. So the ERO, the booth level officer, the district election officer, they are the ones who are responsible for updating the voter rolls after every revision exercise. They should have seen it, they should have caught it. Why didn't they do it? Now, is there a problem of ethicality? I cannot really explain, because that will require investigation into these matters. But is there negligence? This is a very clear case of negligence. And how do we say that? This is probably the first example, ever since this controversy has blown up, where the Election Commission, if you read the newspapers today, the Chief Electoral Officers actually of Maharashtra has called for a report on this particular discrepancy in the Nalasopara voter list of that, that Nilemore village. They've called for it. And they've said, how can this happen? Delete all except one genuine entry. So that very clearly shows that it was a case of negligence, and not just by one person, from the booth level officer to the electoral registration officer to the district election officer. So this is what some calls urgent attention of not just civil society and the media, but also the Election Commission to take correctives, to look at their own protocols of revising and finalizing these electoral rolls. And in the course of taking that second look at those protocols, and with particular reference to these kinds of discrepancies which are now being proven one by one, then the question of ethicality can also be probed. And that, I think, is the responsibility of the Election Commission in collaboration with law enforcement agencies. Because if you will recall, Section 32 of the Representation of People Act 1950, which pertains to the demarcation of constituencies for the Lok Sabha and Vidhan Sabha elections, and even the elections for the Rajya Sabha, legislative councils in states wherever they exist. So that's a comprehensive law. Now there Section 32 very clearly says that if there is a breach of official duty by any election officer pertaining to any of the statutory duties that they are supposed to perform under that particular law, then that is punishable with fine, unspecified amount, it could be any amount, and also minimum jail term of about 3 months, of 1 month or so, up to a maximum of 3 years. And there the consequences for the officers who are responsible for this kind of breach of duty, the go-ahead, the green signal for that has to be given by the Election Commission. So the question of ethicality is not something that can be simply left hanging up there in the air. It is something that is required to be probed by the Election Commission, and I'm hoping that they will do it. My organization primarily works on two issues: improving people's access to information from the state agencies and improving people's access to justice. And our particular focus is on police reform and prison reform, making those administrations more transparent and accountable. So since 2018, we've been looking at the levels of transparency in the electoral processes. Now, of course, a lot of data about elections, the preparation for elections, etc., all of that is available publicly. The Election Commission, the Chief Electoral Officer's Office, and the district election officers, they all have websites. And quite a bit of that information is publicly available. However, information, official records and documents that are necessary for fixing the accountability of the system and accountability of the electoral functionaries, that is not proactively disclosed, particularly over the last few years. And I'll give you some examples. Form 17C, which actually is a form that is filled up in two parts. The first time it is filled up is by the presiding officer of a polling station, asserting to the number of electors who were eligible to cast their vote to that polling station and the number of men, women and transgenders who actually cast their vote. These kinds of forms used to be made, they were publicly available for every polling station on the Election Commission's website through their database. Over the last few years, that has been stopped. Political parties have been demanding outside of the electoral process, and the Election Commission says we don't have a duty to give it to them. Similarly, the electronic voting machines. A whole lot of information about voting machines is available in the form of manuals and PowerPoint presentations on the Election Commission's website and on the Chief Electoral Officer's websites. What is not available is a really detailed explanation to the voter who is supposed to trust those machines as to how those machines work. We also don't have information about the number of machines that go bad, that become defective at various stages, and this is something that we've been probing. They are found to be defective when they are pulled out of the strong rooms, and what is called first level checking is done about 6 months prior to the elections, either to the Lok Sabha or the Vidhan Sabha or even a by-election. 6 months earlier it has to begin. So they discover which machines are defective, and they are either sent to the factory. There are only two companies which manufacture electronic voting machines. One is Bharat Electronics Limited and the other is the Electronics Corporation of India Limited. They are the only two PSUs which have the exclusive duopoly on the manufacture of these machines. So that data about how many machines were defective was never made public. So we had to file RTI applications and demand that information, and with great difficulty we managed to get it, and we were able to show that thousands of machines went bad during the 2019 Lok Sabha elections. Tens of thousands, about 88,000, and the Election Commission also admitted that. In 2024, they refused to disclose the information. And now, whenever we ask for this kind of information, these are just some examples. I'll give you another, really damning example, which your viewers should be aware of. Anyway, so when we ask for this information, the standard reply that the Election Commission gives is that this is information that we don't have in our office. It is probably available with the Chief Electoral Officer's offices, or go to the EROs, or go to the district election offices, or the returning officers and collect it from them. But we cannot transfer this RTI application to them when they have the email addresses of all those officers at the click of a button, and they can just transfer it by simply sending a mail. They simply don't do it. Now, the most damning example. You would be surprised to know, and this was a discovery that we made last year during the Lok Sabha elections. Civil society groups who were very keen on having an unimpeachable electoral process wanted to send a communication to all the returning officers and all the district electoral officers, election officers across the country, simply urging them to abide by the election laws and rules and procedures laid down, because those are pretty standard procedures, and there isn't too much difficulty with them in terms of their content. You would be surprised to know that the Election Commission's website does not have a consolidated list of the returning officers of each of those constituencies. Chief Electoral Officers' websites don't have those details. Some have, some don't. So when I filed an RTI application with the Election Commission of India saying, please give me a consolidated list of returning officers for all the 543 Lok Sabha constituencies, they said, we don't have the information. So these are the simplest of kinds of information that should be available in the public domain, which are simply not accessible. Proactively, the Election Commission does not make them public, and at the same time, when you file an RTI application also, they give these kinds of evasive replies. That is what is hugely problematic, because that is when suspicions begin to strengthen. What is initially an allegation turns into a suspicion. What is the Commission hiding? Why is it not able to put up a consolidated list of returning officers on its website? What is preventing them from doing it? Because they, during the electoral process, they are in touch with the returning officers on a daily basis, sometimes even an hourly basis. Which means you know whom to contact, you know which number to contact, you know which person to contact. But you do not want to tell the people that this is the list. Electorate also would like to contact those returning officers, no? What we are increasingly realizing is, first of all, there seems to be an unspoken but well implemented policy of opacity from Nirvachan Sadan. That is very clearly known. We are still able to get information from district election officers. I have done quite a bit of RTI interventions in my home state of Karnataka, and on multiple occasions I have managed to get information. CEO offices also do share information. Now, there are two bundles lying there on my desk where the Chief Electoral Officer's Office of Maharashtra has given me certain information under the Right to Information Act. So the opacity policy is not something that has uniformly seeped across the electoral bureaucracy. That's number one. Now, number two, the other inference that we can draw from all these developments that relate to unreliable electoral rolls, multiple entries, bogus addresses and all of that, the supervisory and accountability mechanism is probably something that has broken down. Otherwise, how is it that on one sheet of paper you will find the same name, same photograph entered 5 times, of which only one is deleted? Somebody who had the responsibility of verifying all of that has simply not done it. So this is huge cause for concern, and this is something that even our Honorable Supreme Court of India has to take very seriously. Unfortunately, what we are hearing in publicly reported proceedings of the court in various election related matters, a huge and astronomical amount of confidence is being placed, A, on the electoral system, and B, on the ability of the Election Commission to man and work that election system. But feedback from the ground level is showing that electoral system is actually, it's broken in many places. This is something that the Supreme Court has to take cognizance of. There are other activists who are working in Maharashtra who are claiming that this is not an uncommon phenomenon. The voter lists in many constituencies require vetting because there are problematic entries there. Beyond this, I will not be able to say anything much because I have not seen them myself, so I will not be able to comment on them. But when, there is something called in the realm of environmental protection and preventing damage to the environment, there is something called precautionary principle. That if you expect that a certain measure, a certain industry, a certain action is likely to impact adversely on the environment, even before such an impact has occurred, it is important to take precautions to prevent that from happening. Now here, case after case of problems with the electoral processes are being disclosed publicly. So it's a little late to adopt the precautionary principle, but at least this can be taken as warning bells. Now ultimately, what is the responsibility of the Election Commission, as they keep saying time and again in public fora, before the before the Supreme Court, and what the government says in Parliament? The supreme responsibility for preparing the electoral rolls, ultimate responsibility also, and conducting elections, management, superintendence, all of that lies with the Election Commission, which means that there is a huge obligation, constitutional obligation on the Election Commission to ensure that the electoral process is conducted in a fair, transparent manner, where if there are problems, then accountability will be fixed. Unfortunately, that is another RTI of mine which the Election Commission dodged. I had asked them about the action taken so far in cases where they found that ineligible individuals were included in the voter list, and probably they had cast their votes also. We can't prove that because voter participation in elections is always a matter of secrecy. So you don't know who's gone and voted, which is also a fair requirement. The Election Commission flatly told me that we don't have this information about who's taken action against which election officer for a breach of duty, when Section 32 very clearly says that no action can be taken against any election officer for breach of duty without the approval of the Election Commission, which means you should have that data, you should have the information. But you are refusing to even recognize that we may have the information, we look for it and we will tell you. None of that is happening. They are just simply flatly saying, which is not really the truth, is that we don't have this information at all. That could lead to either two conclusions. Either the Commission really does not have that information, which implies that no action has been taken against anybody for breach of duty, which is even more serious. So that is what is hugely problematic, because the kinds of explanations that they are giving in response to every such case, every such claim, every such complaint, every such grievance that is being placed in the public domain by various people, the explanations are simply not convincing most of the time. And that is not really helping the image of the Election Commission, because once upon a time there was an image of the Election Commission as being one of the best in the world. If they have to retain that position because they conduct the most participated of elections, then nowhere in the world do you have an electorate of this size. Nowhere in the world do you have so many candidates contesting elections. So it becomes all the more important for the Election Commission not only to show that it is doing everything according to the rule book, but also appear as if they are doing everything to the rule book. Right now they are trying to show by claiming that yes, we have done everything. But then when these kinds of problems are brought in front of them, they do not, their explanations do not seem convincing at all. So they don't seem to be appearing as if they are being very fair and accountable towards the people. This is the other thing that I want to point out, that the Election Commission for some reason thinks that it is the political parties who are the primary stakeholders in elections. Yes, of course they are primary stakeholders because they contest in elections, they conduct the campaigns, they raise money, they spend it, but ultimately the primary stakeholders of an electoral process are the voters of the country. Take the voters out of the equation, then what is it that the candidates are going to contest for? For whose mandate are they going to contest elections, to sit in Parliament? So the voters are the primary stakeholders, and when voters start raising these concerns, like the two people who appeared before the Supreme Court and said, "My lord, we are now recorded as dead in the voter rolls." That was done without asking us for any documents. But now when we went back to our election officers in our constituencies and said, "I am alive, please include me in the voters list," they are asking me for scores of documents to prove that I am alive. How did you remove them? By claiming that they were dead without any single documentary support. So when these kinds of things are presented before the Supreme Court or in public fora, then the Election Commission cannot afford to call it as drama. That is just not convincing at all. You have to take the responsibility because documentary proof is being shown, and the person who has been affected, who's effectively been disenfranchised, has come before you. You have to take that case as a warning bell and go back to your offices and start revisiting the entire voter list and the process of revising them.
So, sir, do you think that there are more hidden discrepancies in the voter list of Maharashtra?
There could be. That is what requires investigation, and that is where I hope this is not something that just one party or one organization can do. This is where a range of actors have to get together, because ultimately it is a stake that all of us are involved in. It is our stake, because if we have a clear and clean electoral process that is reliable, then it is for our benefit. If it's an unreliable process, then it is not for our benefit at all. So academics, media persons, electoral reform advocates, political parties, civil society organizations, they all have to get down to cross-checking, verifying, not just in Maharashtra, but everywhere. Because the Election Commission doesn't seem to be doing this on its own, so far as its reactions to these complaints which are publicly available. When you look at them, they are not planning to do anything in a large way. Now this is where the pressure from because ultimately this electoral system doesn't belong to the Election Commission alone. It doesn't belong to them at all. They are just custodians. The electoral system belongs to the citizens. It belongs to the electorate of the country. Even if somebody is less than 18 years old, the person who will be elected to sit in parliament or in the state assembly will represent that person who is below 18. So a stake is there for anybody who is an elector or not an elector. And we all have this responsibility to work towards ensuring that the electoral process is reliable. And the first thing to do probably would be to start looking at the reliability of the electoral rolls. Given the size of the electorate, some problems will occur somewhere or the other. But let us also recognize that the entire electoral process is a very decentralized process. It is not completely dependent on Nirvachan Sadan, according to Election Commission's own admission. They say that, look, we are only here for guiding, supervising, issuing directions, monitoring. The actual work has to be done at the constituency level, at the polling station level ultimately. So in a decentralized process, problems will occur. That's precisely why you have supervisory and accountability mechanisms. If those don't work, as we saw in the context of Nalasopara, then there is a serious problem. Now that is where, I would repeat, public pressure, public engagement and involvement, that has to increase. The Election Commission, at the time of announcing polling schedules for general elections of the assembly in the states or the parliament, they always say that these elections can be conducted only with the cooperation of the people. They have to live up to that statement by treating people who give this feedback to them not as adversaries, but as people who are whistleblowers, people who are well-wishers, first and foremost of the democracy and of the Election Commission. Nobody would like to see the Election Commission shut down, but we would like to see the Election Commission perform better. So ironing out, making sure that there is a very high degree of accuracy, that is a responsibility on the Election Commission, of course, and there it has to take into confidence the people who are raising these complaints and grievances, examine them. If they are not valid, if they lack in truth or veracity, discard them, issue a warning. But in the context of Nalasopara, like I explained earlier, they found that this report that many of us have worked on is unimpeachable. Their own records are showing multiple entries. And now they are saying that, okay, now we will try and delete all names except one. That is the kind of response that we expect in every case where people raise complaints. The challenges so far have been lack of responsiveness, but in a way it is good because they have never, the kind of, we've publicly disclosed the outcome of practically all our RTA interventions that have been made with the Election Commission. And I am very confident in saying this. In not a single case has the election come back and said these people are talking nonsense, or this is not what we said in our RTA reply. So to that extent, whatever we've said stands uncontested. Okay, but this is not something that we can continue to do forever given the very limited resources that we have. That's one part of the problem. Second part of the problem also is that whenever we do not get the information, we can always escalate it to the next stage in through the appeals process. Sometimes we do that. And even there, if we are not satisfied, we can escalate the lack of disclosure of information to the Information Commission stage. But now what has happened? The Election Commission, their second appeals against their refusals will all lie with the Central Information Commission. There are only 3 members there. One Chief Election Commissioner and 2 one Chief Information Commissioner and 2 Information Commissioners. There are 8 vacancies. So by the time my second appeal, in most of these cases, if I file them, by the time they are even scheduled for hearing, it will be more than a year. So if I get information that late, what is it of any use? Now, whose responsibility is it to fill up those vacancies? It is the government's responsibility. They have to get the search committee to work, they have to get the selection committee to meet, and they have to make recommendations. Civil society activists have shown on the basis of hard evidence that since 2014, ever since the NDA government has come to power, neither at the central level nor in the states have vacancies in the Information Commissions been filled up until and unless the higher judiciary, it could be the Supreme Court or the high courts of the states, until they have directed that these posts should be filled up urgently. So these are some of the challenges that we are facing, where the various forums that have been created either by the Constitution or by laws made by Parliament for people to knock on those doors and seek redress, if they do not function in the manner in which they are required to function, then these kinds of tasks become even more challenging. I would like to remind your viewers that sometime in between 2019 and 2022, a whole process was put into motion through the Citizens Commission on Elections. Every aspect of the election, either at the Lok Sabha level or at the Vidhan Sabha level, was examined, from voter lists down to voting machines, down to campaign financing, money power, muscle power. They have all been examined, and recommendations have been made for improvement. The Election Commission has not even bothered to respond to those recommendations. Nevertheless, we do not want to lose hope for the simple reason that this is our country, it's our Election Commission, it is our electoral process, it is ultimately our democracy. So what are the brief recommendations that I could make? First and foremost, with the exception of releasing information that would compromise secrecy of the voter's choice at the polling booth, everything else should be in the public domain. Election Commission has a very high standard of transparency to meet, which it has not even been attempting to meet. They are still working on the basis of what we call need to know, rather than the voter's right to know. That has to change. And then they have to proactively disclose a lot of information about what they are doing to ensure a free and fair and transparent electoral process. We haven't even talked about the issue of the influence of money power and muscle power in this discussion. That is another ball game. You would be surprised to know, your viewers actually should know this. There are a whole lot of reports and documents that get created to place, take note of the amount of money that is spent in the constituencies during campaigning. There are a whole lot of reports. None of them have been made public. The only thing that we get to know are all the data about seizures. How much gold, how much cash, how much of campaign material in the form of sarees, dhotis, kurtas were distributed. Drugs and liquor. Beyond that, we don't get to know anything. What happened to all those criminal cases? In just my home state, I found out 40,000 criminal cases were filed during the course of the campaign for the Lok Sabha elections in 2024. We don't know what has happened to those 40,000 cases. How many have been sent for prosecution? How many have been closed due to lack of evidence? Or how many have been closed because there was nothing to prosecute? So transparency is something that is absolutely crucial. The another recommendation is for the Election Commission to treat political parties, particularly of the opposition, and the citizenry, the civil society organizations and the media who are pointing to these problems, not as adversaries, but as people who are well-wishers, people who can be engaged with in order to improve the process. That is another thing. Then the third thing that is required is something that I would say that, of course, the conduct of elections is exclusively the business of the election bureaucracy led by the Election Commission, but I think the governments of the day at the central level and at the state level also have a fair degree of responsibility for ensuring that these matters are looked into. For example, the district election officer is also invariably the district magistrate of the district. Now, if he or she is not disclosing details about, let us say, the monitoring reports that they have put together, then the government can always say, please make this public. What is there to prevent them from from making that public? From telling the district level review committees, there are 3-member committees which are supposed to look at these criminal cases that are filed to see whether one can proceed further, or those cases need to be wound up by moving the court. Now, what is the harm in telling the head of that committee, who is again the district magistrate, to say, please make your reports public? You don't have to wait for the election commission to do this all the time. So it is more and more transparency that will increase people's confidence in the government, in the electoral bureaucracy, in the electoral processes. The more opaque you become, the more suspicions that will continue to remain. So these are my primary recommendations. Otherwise, technical points, there are several recommendations on every aspect of the elections. I don't want to bore your viewers with that, but primarily transparency and showing how have you set the accountability process in motion. That is absolutely crucial for strengthening people's trust, people's confidence in the electoral system.